People love to talk about interstellar travel like it is just a matter of building a bigger rocket, like the only thing standing between us and the stars is a lack of ambition or funding. But that is not the problem at all. The problem is that nature herself has set up a series of walls, and each wall is harder than the last. And by the time you understand what those walls are made of, you start to realize they are not engineering problems. They are physics problems. And physics problems do not get solved by throwing money at them. So let us start at the very beginning, not with rockets, not with propulsion systems, but with a simple question. What is energy, and what does it cost to move something fast? When you push a ball across a table, you give it kinetic energy. The formula most people remember from school is 1/2 times mass times velocity squared. That little equation is one of the most important things ever written down. Notice what it says. The energy grows with the square of the velocity. So if you double the speed, you do not double the energy needed. You quadruple it. Triple the speed, you need 9 times the energy. That squaring is already brutal, and we have not even left the solar system yet. Now here is where it gets genuinely cruel. That formula, 1/2 mv squared, is only an approximation. It works fine for slow things, cars, planes, even rockets. But once you start pushing something toward a significant fraction of the speed of light, nature says no, that equation is not good enough anymore. You need the real version, the relativistic version. And the relativistic version does something that no engineer wants to hear. As your velocity approaches the speed of light, the energy required does not just grow fast, it approaches infinity. Literally. You would need an infinite amount of energy to push any object with mass all the way to the speed of light. That is not a practical limitation. That is a mathematical absolute. Let me make this concrete. Suppose you want to send a spacecraft to our nearest neighboring star, Proxima Centauri, about 4 light-years away. If you want to get there in a reasonable human lifetime, say 40 years of travel time, you need to be moving at roughly 10% of the speed of light. That is about 30 million meters per second. Now take a spacecraft with the mass of a modest interplanetary probe, something like 10,000 kilograms, just 10 metric tons. Plug that into the relativistic kinetic energy formula. The energy you need to accelerate that object to 10% of light speed is roughly 4.5 times 10 to the power of 20 joules. That is 450 billion joules. The entire world's energy consumption, every power plant, every engine, every fire burning on the planet Earth, produces about 6 times 10 to the power of 20 joules in a full year. So to push 10 metric tons to 10% of light speed, you need almost a full year of the entire planet's energy output, and that is just for 10 metric tons. A real crewed spacecraft with life support, shielding, food, water, and fuel would be thousands of times more massive. The numbers become so large they stop feeling like numbers and start feeling like a physical joke. But wait, it gets worse, because I have only been talking about the problem of acceleration. I have not even mentioned what happens when your ship is actually moving. People imagine space as empty, a vast, dark, clean vacuum between the stars. And compared to Earth's atmosphere, it is indeed nearly empty. But nearly is doing a tremendous amount of work in that sentence. The region between stars, what physicists call the interstellar medium, is not a perfect vacuum. It is filled with stuff. Sparse stuff, yes. But at the speeds we are talking about, sparse becomes catastrophic. The interstellar medium contains hydrogen atoms, mostly in the form of individual protons. The average density is about 1 hydrogen atom per cubic centimeter. Now that sounds like nothing. You could breathe a cubic centimeter of air and take in about 27 billion molecules in one breath. 1 atom per cubic centimeter is laughably sparse. You would never notice it walking through it at normal human speeds. But here is the physics of the problem. Think about a rainstorm. If you stand outside in a rainstorm, you get wet at a certain rate. The drops fall on you, they hit your face and your shoulders, and there is a certain energy per drop, a gentle patter. Now imagine you are standing still, and the rain is not moving very fast, almost a drizzle, fine. But now imagine you are driving your car at highway speed through that same drizzle. Suddenly those gentle drops hit your windshield with a crack. The drops did not change. Your speed relative to them did. The energy of each impact is a function of relative velocity. The faster you move through the drops, the harder each one hits. Now take that idea and push it to the extreme. Your spaceship is moving at 90% of the speed of light. That stationary hydrogen atom hanging in the void is, from your ship's perspective, flying at you at 90% of light speed. Each individual hydrogen atom, which is just a proton, a single tiny particle, hits your hull with an energy comparable to what particle accelerators produce in their collision experiments. Each single proton collision releases energy like a tiny but very real radiation event, and there is one of these per cubic centimeter along your path. At 90% of light speed, you are sweeping through a tube of space that is, say, 100 square meters in cross-section, the size of your ship's forward face. Every second, you are encountering an enormous number of these particles. Let me calculate it roughly so you can see the scale. At 90% of light speed, you are moving about 270,000 kilometers per second. In 1 second, you sweep through a column of space about 270 million kilometers long and 100 square meters wide. That volume, converted to cubic centimeters, is about 2.7 times 10 to the power of 21 cubic centimeters. At 1 hydrogen atom per cubic centimeter, your ship encounters roughly 2.7 times 10 to the power of 21 protons every single second. Each one of those protons, in the relativistic frame of your ship, carries an energy of roughly a few 100 million electron volts. Multiply those two numbers together. The total power being deposited into the front of your ship every second is in the range of tens of millions of watts per square meter. That is not a little radiation exposure. That is a continuous, ferocious beam of proton radiation, not unlike standing directly in front of a large particle accelerator beam, but sustained indefinitely for the entire journey. No material known to physics can survive that kind of bombardment without being eroded, ionized, and destroyed. The front of your ship is not just getting heated. The atoms of your hull are being knocked out of place by individual proton impacts. The metal, or whatever exotic alloy you imagine using, is being slowly atomized from the outside in, what we call sputtering in laboratory physics. At relativistic speeds, it is not slow. The front surface of your ship begins to ablate, and the erosion rate is faster than any engineering solution can compensate for. And here is the thermodynamic insult on top of everything else. Even if you somehow solved the energy problem, even if you had a magical energy source of infinite capacity, even if you built your ship out of some theoretically perfect material, you still have not solved the radiation problem, because the radiation is not coming from outside the ship in the traditional sense. It is being created by the ship's own motion through an environment that is almost, but not quite, empty. You cannot shield against it in any conventional way, because the shielding itself would need to be placed in the path of the particles, and the shielding material would be destroyed just as fast as the hull. Some people propose a magnetic shield, a strong magnetic field projected ahead of the ship to deflect incoming protons. This is not insane as an idea. Magnetic fields do deflect charged particles, and it is the same principle used in some theoretical designs, but the problem is energy. A magnetic field strong enough to deflect relativistic protons over the cross-section of a large spacecraft requires a tremendous amount of power to sustain. And maintaining that field for decades of travel, while also running the ship, while also decelerating at the destination, adds yet another colossal layer to an already impossible energy budget. Now let us talk about deceleration, because people forget this entirely. When you think about interstellar travel, you probably picture the ship getting up to speed and then coasting. And yes, in space you can coast. There is no friction in the traditional sense, ignoring the interstellar medium effects we just discussed. But when you arrive at your destination star system, you are still moving at nearly the speed of light. And you cannot just stop, you have to decelerate. And decelerating requires just as much energy as accelerating. Every joule you spent speeding up, you now need to spend again, in the opposite direction, slowing down. So double the already impossible energy budget, unless you have a way to collect energy along the way. This is the idea behind the Bussard ramjet, a concept from the 1960s. The idea is beautiful in its simplicity. As your ship moves through the interstellar medium, you scoop up the hydrogen atoms ahead of you and use them as fuel for a fusion reactor, powering both the thrust and collecting new fuel as you go. In theory, it could solve both the fuel problem and the particle collision problem simultaneously. The hydrogen that would have destroyed your hull instead gets funneled into your engine. But when physicists actually ran the numbers, starting in earnest in the 1970s, the problem became clear. The drag created by the electromagnetic scoop trying to collect hydrogen atoms over a large area turns out to be greater than the thrust you could produce from fusing those atoms. The interstellar hydrogen density is simply too low. You would need a scoop with a radius of thousands of kilometers just to collect enough fuel to maintain thrust at a modest fraction of light speed, and the power required to operate that scoop exceeds what the fusion reaction produces. It is not a propulsion system, it is a brake. So every clever idea runs into the same wall. The wall is not made of ignorance or limited engineering skill. The wall is made of fundamental physics. Energy scales catastrophically with velocity. The interstellar medium becomes a radiation environment at relativistic speeds. Deceleration doubles the energy requirement. And any attempt to harvest energy from the environment introduces more drag than thrust. Let us also think about time. Even if you could somehow travel at 10% of light speed, which we have established requires more energy than the Earth produces in a year just for a tiny ship, the travel time to Proxima Centauri would be 40 years one way. No food system, no life support system, no social structure, no human psychology has ever been designed to sustain a crew for 40 years in a sealed metal box, let alone the centuries it would take to reach more interesting destinations. And this is at 10% of light speed, which is already thermodynamically catastrophic. The only way around the time problem is to go faster. And the faster you go, the worse all the other problems get. At 50% of light speed, the relativistic kinetic energy of your ship is about 15% higher than the classical estimate, which is already enormous. At 90% of light speed, it is more than twice the classical estimate. At 99%, more than 7 times. At 99.9%, over 22 times. The energy required explodes upward non-linearly, while the particle bombardment problem simultaneously gets worse, because the particles you hit are blue-shifted to even higher energies. Nature has set things up so that the faster you try to go, the harder every single problem becomes, all at the same time. There is a beautiful and brutal consistency to this. It is not like there is one big problem to solve. There are several separate, independent problems, and each one, on its own, would be nearly insurmountable. Taken together, they form a kind of absolute physical argument. It is not that we cannot figure out how to do it yet. It is that the laws of thermodynamics, kinetic energy, relativistic mechanics, and atomic physics all simultaneously, independently, and consistently say the same thing. You cannot take a macroscopic object, something built from atoms, powered by chemistry or nuclear reactions, and move it between stars in a human lifetime. The physics does not bend for that request. This is one of those situations where nature is not being mysterious. Nature is being completely transparent. She wrote the equations, she lets you read them, and the equations say no. Not no with an asterisk, not no unless you build something clever. Just no. The energy is unavailable in the universe in a form that a physical object could carry and use. The radiation environment at those speeds destroys any known or theoretically possible material. The timescales involved exceed human civilization by orders of magnitude for any speeds that are physically achievable without infinite energy. And yet, this is not a sad story. Because understanding where the wall is, understanding exactly what the wall is made of, that is the beginning of honest science. You cannot solve a problem you have not correctly identified. Most of science is identifying the actual problem, not the apparent one. The apparent problem of interstellar travel looks like an engineering problem. The actual problem is a thermodynamic and relativistic one, and now that we know that, we can ask the right questions. Not how do we build a better rocket, but is there a regime of physics we do not yet know, something at the intersection of energy, space, and matter that the equations are not yet capturing. That is where the real frontier is, not in bigger engines, in deeper physics.